that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon.
Hello and welcome to With Bowl and Spoon, a podcast about people's personal food evolution. I'm here today with my friend, Vencio. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself now that I've said your name 200 times?
My name's Rafael. I was born and raised in the Philippines. I immigrated here when I was a little bit older, and I've lived across the U.S. in several cities, so my exposure to American culture has been really diverse and broad. I now live in Pittsburgh, which is the longest city I've lived so far. So I've definitely soaked in the Yinzer kind of character. But I've also fallen in love with the place, you know. There's a strong culinary history in this area. And I can associate a lot of what I'm passionate about, food, particularly in this region, just because of like the nostalgia and the whimsy that I kind of like. My coming into age in food, and particularly my career in food too, helped why I really like PA or Pittsburgh in general. And now I'm currently a farmer. I've been trying to introduce a lot of the foods that I grew up eating. So I sell at farmers markets. I have a small quarter-acre land that I farm on, but it's really a way for me to connect with that missing link. You know, I've always felt homesick, and essentially growing these foods, cooking them, eating them, that's become my way to reconnect. And especially when someone at the market would just like an immigrant as well, who would recognize the food, the product that I bring at the market, and you can see that happiness in their eyes, like this is home. And I think that's been my goal, and I really like being able to just showcase that and do a different side of my food evolution.
So let's go back a little bit.
Sure.
That's great. I love that. And I mean, we could be done right now, but we won't be. So when did you first move to the States, and why?
When I was younger, right around like 7 or 8, my family became permanent residents, so we were granted green card status. So that was the youngest I was when we first started coming to the U.S. But I also have family here, so I have family in the Midwest and LA. So I was split between the West Coast and Chicago for the most part of the time that we would travel here. But my family decided that we wanted to finish our education back home. So we would always come back and just kind of like do our requirements here in the U.S. Because we still have to, as a permanent resident, we still have to fulfill the obligations for naturalization. So we have to come back here regularly and then go back home, study, and then come back again and study. So we don't default. But it wasn't until I was 19 when I decided this is it. I'm stepping out of home, Mom. That was hard because, you know, in my culture, families stick together for the longest. It's common for offsprings or, you know, for like your kids to stay with you until like their 30s, their 40s. You know, that's very common in our culture. It was really hard for me to leave, but at the same time, I was eager to just really, I wanted to start a new life. I've been reading about, funny enough, in our education system in the Philippines, we study American history at the same time we study our own history. Partly because of the influences. You know, we have 3 major influences in our history. Spain, the U.S., and Japan are the 3 main. So we follow through on almost everything that the U.S. has, even pop culture, which is funny enough, you know. So I've always read about it, and I was super fascinated about American life. So I was just like, I'm ready.
Do you also study Japanese and Spanish?
We do. Part of really mostly just how they came to our country, how they colonized us, the introduction of Catholicism, so religion being the primary driving factor. A lot of the schools in the Philippines are Catholic, so it's imperative. Like, we study religion based off of like how it was brought to our country. Only the good parts, though.
Right.
They kind of like put away the ugly bits and pieces.
Colonizers are very clever, aren't
Right?
they?
They have a good way of presenting it in a bow.
And to instill fear.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, so you came here when you were 19. Did you come to Pittsburgh at that point?
So I decided to stay with my family in LA, in Los
Okay.
Angeles. So that was like literally fresh off the boat. It was a culture shock.
There was a plane,
Yeah.
wasn't there? It wasn't a boat. I know.
But-
I'm on to
Yes.
you.
It was really a culture shock, even though you would consider LA to be a melting pot. Amongst Filipinos, as like one of the places that we consider as like a safe place because there are so much of us there. But yeah, I decided LA was my first go, but it wasn't long until I'm like, I need to explore. But I did choose LA because of family. It was easier to just kind of introduce myself into the culture and the new norm. And, you know, I got my first kind of like bearings on what it was to be like an American.
Yeah, what part of LA were you in?
So Filipino town, right along at the very edge of it.
I've
So-
never been to Filipino town, LA, so yeah.
It's kind of tricky because it's right next to like Thai town and stuff. So I'm right at the cusp of Silver Lake Boulevard and Echo Park.
Okay.
That's like the area. It's also like close to I'm trying to think, not West Hollywood though. Santa Monica.
Okay.
So that's its closest, yeah, around those three like areas.
Talk about how you got started with being a chef.
How did I become a chef? I think the easiest answer to that really is that immigrants have kind of like a very limited option when they first come to the country. I think we can all agree that food is the easiest way to find a job. Needless to say, you know, because this is the one career that there's really not much of an extensive background check. I didn't really have any work experience, so it was really hard to kind of find other avenues, even though my background was actually multimedia arts. So I studied graphic design, web page, you know, and kind of like video production. I was more in the arts than I was in cooking. But coming into this country, cooking was the easiest job. My first job was actually Burger King, of all things. I'm not even kidding. And I mean, I do have a soft spot for Burger King.
I was a Wendy's girl.
I'm a Burger King guy. I love Burger King. I don't know. Something about it was just not because it was my first job, but I think in the Philippines, right before I was leaving, a lot of the other fast food joints started to establish franchises there. Like the last time I went home, IHOP was just like the new thing, and I'm like, people are lining up at IHOP. But that's kind of like our fascination with the Western culture, you know. Yeah, basically, food is the easiest job. That's why I decided, you know what, I'm going to start this out. I didn't really decide on being a chef. I think when I got into food work, that's when the celebrity chef started to define itself. So it became more of like an attractant to me. I started thinking about like, well, maybe I can cook for a living. Maybe I can be a professional chef that can like, you know. And then the rest was history. I just kind of like, from every city that I've lived, I've always relied on food as my go-to for work. It was always easy to find work wherever I lived because of food.
Okay. So what surprised you about food in the U.S. when you first got here?
Oh,
you know,
gosh.
whatever. Like some of the first...
I have a really good answer to that. So, LA really was the pivotal moment for me. I guess sometimes it's hard to break old habits, right? And when you first come to a different country, I wasn't eating hamburgers and French fries per se. I was still kind of like, I know this is kind of stereotypical, but rice was king in our cuisine. You know, we eat rice with everything. So I was still kind of like doing that, and I thought I was eating the same stuff, like still eating vegetable heavy or vegetable forward meals with a little meat. But I noticed I was gaining weight. And I'm like, that can't be right. I mean, I haven't changed my diet. I haven't changed my preferences. It's not like I'm eating greasy food all the time. I did start eating Burger King Whoppers. Maybe that didn't help, but no, but realistically, I was starting to notice like there's something odd with what's happening with, you know, and the one thing that I could single out was food, because, you know, like I wasn't really doing much. I mean, maybe I wasn't so physical yet in terms of like running or exercising, but I didn't really change much on my diet. But I started gaining weight, and I realized like, what is up with that? And I think that's the first thing that gave me a hint, like maybe there is something different with, you know, I think we have this idea like we all maybe we eat the same things, but we grow it differently. And that's when I'm like, it dawned on me, like maybe it's grown and produced differently. That's why it's affecting me this way. It was so adverse, and I couldn't put my finger on it until I realized like it really is the way we grow stuff here and the way we process it and produce it. So that was the first indicator.
That is very interesting, because I've heard stories from people about how they gained weight when they came here and ate the same thing, but they were having more like they were eating bread, or they were eating other foods that had been somewhat processed. And so there are added things in there. But with a fresh food diet like you're describing, it seems very odd to me that would be the case.
Yeah.
But you making that point that we grow our food differently and therefore it affects us differently that's astonishing.
It is, yeah. And it's really remarkable how, you know, like most people don't necessarily think that because of the convenience of our food systems. You know, we've made our food here in this country very convenient that we neglect the factors that really affect our health overall. You know, convenience is king. I realized that from the very, very beginning, that people would pay for that. I sometimes default to convenience when I'm like, you know, like trying to make dinner, and I'm like, I have no time. Screw it. I'm just gonna. But I choose my battles. Yeah. I think knowing what I know now, I definitely have a much better background in just realizing like this choice matters at this particular moment. Back then I was just like trying to eat, you know, I didn't know any better. And especially I was just like had no prior living experience here. So now I'm like, okay, I guess the organic stuff does matter compared to the generic stuff. You know, it makes big difference in terms of the overall impact. Yeah.
So do you have formal culinary training?
Not quite. So I did apprentice under two different chefs. The apprenticeship wasn't so formal, really. They just kind of noticed that I had some potential. The first one was I live in Montana, of all places. His name's Kash Keel, Kash. He was the first chef. He went to culinary school and everything. I worked in this brewery, which had like a small food nook, and we made like tacos, burritos, like typical Americana shit that they can like put together in any place, right? And he was a frequent patron there, and he was like, you know what, you really have like, you have the makings of a good chef, you know, like just by watching you. So he was the one that kind of like roped me in. So I quit that job. I started working for him, and then that was when he was like really kind of gave me the introduction to it. I didn't really kind of invest any studying towards it, but that kind of gave me the inkling. It wasn't until I moved to Reno, of all places, where I started working in hotels. So the chef that I worked for under that the restaurant in one of those hotels, he was the one that took me under his wing. So in terms of like developing my skill, my prowess, I credit him for that. He definitely gave me the background. Essentially, he kind of like showed me the path, and he was like, go ahead, walk it. After that, I was mostly self-taught.
Well, you are very good at teaching yourself. Because as we sit here on the Hilltop Farm, in amongst the Hilltop Farm, And we just visited your garden, which is amazing.
Thank you.
You are now a farmer.
Yes.
So you've taken your culinary background and you've started farming, and not very long ago as a self-taught farmer, and your produce is some of the most beautiful and
thank you.
also some of the most unique that I've seen at the market. And I think I tell you this every time I see
I
how
appreciate
beautiful
that.
everything
Thank
is.
you.
But why don't you talk about that transition and how you started to grow food?
I think I don't want to speak for everyone, but I can say for sure that the pandemic catalyzed a lot of things for everybody. When the pandemic hit, I self-assessed. I really wanted to. Food job became very jarring and just heavy and daunting. I just it kind of left a bitter aftertaste when that happened, when the pandemic happened, and
No pun intended,
right?
I'm sure.
I wanted to rekindle that passion, so I started thinking about just really digging in deep and thinking about what mattered to me the most. And I think I've always had that idea, that innate feeling in me that I wanted my work to be purposeful. My grandparents were farmers back home in the Philippines, so that really kind of helped plant the seed. And I could not stop thinking about home. Home was a driving factor. I think that would be the figurative example of what that seed was planted in me. Home kept resounding. So, and I tried to think of ways just how to connect that in what was currently happening in that time. Because we were so shuttered in, and we couldn't really have any direct communication or interaction with people. So it made me even miss home more, not being around people that I'm always around. But I just started digging around, again, no pun intended.
There's so many puns.
I know,
you have no idea what
I
your
can't
brain
even
is doing.
stop. And then farming just kind of popped in my head, and I've always thought about farming is a great way because it's very hands-on, it's very physical. And I think looking back, or just kind of remembering, it just it was very nostalgic for me to remember how my grandmother would always tend to her garden. It was always just comforting, and just imagining that experience of eating her food, picking fruits with her, and just she cultivated orchids, and that was the one thing that stuck on me too. So it essentially ushered in that idea in me that maybe I should look into farming. So I dug deep again, and I started looking around for how do you start farming?
Did you just Google?
I did.
I love that so much. Oh my God.
But you got to start somewhere. The one thing that I learned to do for myself is if you really want something done, the one thing I always say is you need to speak up. The power of communication, the power of talk is very strong in anything that you choose to do. The second thing that I think that really helped is just I started to create small goals. So for me, I was just just look it up.
Might I say bite-sized goals?
Bite-sized goals. Achievable, chewable, digestible goals. Essentially, that's what I did. I was just look it up, see if it's even feasible. And then I started seeing certain topics kept recurring that made me that stood out, and urban was one, and then urban and then agriculture, those kind of started coming together. And I knew I didn't want to be too rural. My experience in Montana really helped shape that decision. I love the rural area. I love the Sleepy Hollow kind of feel to it, but I don't necessarily want to live it. I knew I wanted to stay in the city. I wanted to be more of that kind of connection, because part of my other experience that brought me into farming really is just that I knew that there was a disconnect to food. And I think the more that we become insular in our in our cities, in our urban areas, the more that we disconnect to the food. And we always think, oh, you're a farmer, you're a hick, you're from the rural areas. And it's such a degrading idea just to think about, not all farmers are hicks. I think, particularly in this country, because moving fast forward, I didn't know that immigrants had a significant impact and contribution to the culinary history, the agricultural history of the country. The first farmers were Filipinos and blacks and Vietnamese. Like, we were the first farmers of this country because we were the ones developing the crops that became the primary crops of this country. Meanwhile, we're forgotten about it. Like, nobody knows that black people are farmers. Nobody knows that Filipinos are farmers. Nobody knows about that kind of history. So that contributed to that idea that kind of like made me decide, like, you know what? Not only do I want to be a farmer, I want to represent that forgotten history and culture about agriculture in this country. So it shaped overall what I wanted to accomplish. And then from there, I just kind of like started to find my way around, and then next thing you know, I'm at an urban farm incubator. So it's my second time in an incubator program, by the way.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the first time in the incubator program. That's how I actually first became aware of you. Yes. and I met you, but we didn't really we didn't talk or hang out or anything. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you want to talk about that?
So, Small Man Galley was the restaurant incubator in Pittsburgh. I was the inaugural class of that program. Essentially, we were given it's a food hall setup. So we were given our own stall that we operated our own business under one umbrella business, and that really was an introduction for me to be a business owner. I wanted to see what just how my culinary work impacted and affected, but influenced the food scene. So I wanted to be part of it.
Sorry, how did you get? What were you doing right before that?
I was still working for Legume.
Okay.
And essentially, I was still managing kitchens and had my pretty much in the management area of chef work. And I was just kind of like looking around for opportunities, and people have been buzzing about it. A friend slipped in the idea in my head, actually, and she was the one, to her credit, she was the one that really kind of like gave me that opportunity, or showed me that opportunity. So a friend suggested it, and I looked into it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put in an application and just see how it goes, And sure enough, out of all the people that applied, I was one of the 4, and from there, the rest was history.
And what was the idea of your incubator kitchen that you made?
It wasn't Filipino to begin with. My background, believe it or not, I'm predominantly classic French. So I studied French even on my own, and even on my initial apprenticeship and training, it was mostly French techniques, and like that's where I was kind of groomed.
Of all the people that colonized your country,
I know, right?
You did
none of that.
One that's not, yeah.
None of that. So, but it really helped improve my prowess now. I think crediting that direction, it really did give me a better sense of like how to improve on my own. So my concept at Small Man Galley was home style French. I really wanted to capture simple food, and if anything, French cuisine is that, really. It's very it's a lot of distillation, refinement, and just reduction of not necessarily ingredient, but really the technique. So I wanted to showcase that background in me, where I've worked so hard to refine. I'm actually known for being able to develop recipes and like cook other people's food. This was my chance to cook my own food in my own voice. So I kind of just followed through on my current work at that time. Since I was cooking French food and American food, I'm like, well, makes sense. I'm gonna cook home style French. So essentially that became more of American food than French, because of just like the marketability and accessibility of that kind of food for me.
You're back to the simple roots.
Yes.
of food. And then did you start to integrate some of the Filipino dishes in there?
I did. I think it was inevitable, particularly with the Filipino community starting to notice my background. I didn't really stand out in the beginning. I think because of cooking other people's food. I didn't really develop a name for myself in the food scene until I started doing that. So eventually the community was like, well, when are you going to bring this? We're going to bring that. And, and I'm like, and it's hard for me to say no because I know those food. I grew up eating those food. Like, I know how to make them, really, in my sleep. So I started thinking, I'm like, well, maybe I should. But there was one thing I wanted to protect. I wanted to protect my integrity. That program was not designed to be a two-way street. And I realized that from the very beginning. So I didn't... Cooking Filipino food was my goal, but I didn't want anyone to cloud that or to even impede that goal. So I reserved that for myself. Again, this program was not permanent. I knew that it was going to be a certain amount of time, so I just basically worked with blinders on, and I'm just like, I'm just going to cook this style of food, knowing that when I'm done with that program, I still have that core goal of introducing Filipino food, but nobody has any claim on it. I didn't want anyone else to have any claim on that, so I protected that while I was just maintaining that kind of work.
So how long were you at the incubator?
18 months for the restaurant incubator, yeah. Very short.
And then where'd you go from there?
I tested the waters after that. I did pop up. Essentially, that's when I really like, all right, let's deviate away from French and let's now start doing Filipino. So I did a series, and mind you, it hasn't been that long really, even though it has passed. It hasn't. I started doing a monthly pop-up series that kind of like touches on the kind of like the iconic parts of Filipino cuisine. So I did breakfast, I did Chinese influence, I did Spanish influence. So I showcased what those features are that most people don't know about our cuisine, just to give them an idea. And people were perplexed. They were like, Spanish? What? Mexican? What? Like, they didn't know that. So I wanted to feature that. So that became my strategy and my work after the incubator program. I wanted to feature the principles of Filipino cuisine and just kind of like develop that, and then just kind of like work my way, into like figuring out how do I get into a brick and mortar.
And is that where you were when pandemic hit?
Not quite. So I think reality sank in, and I'm like, well, I need something more stable. Particularly in the food career. Again, I don't want to speak for everybody else that works in the food industry, but a lot of times these are the people that live paycheck to paycheck. There was no stability, and inevitably I knew that was imminent. So I needed something that is more secure. So I decided to return to my previous work of being a chef manager. So that was my way of like, all right, I don't want to lose my momentum. I still want to maintain my significance, but I don't want to just like disappear at some restaurant. I wanted to have some more of like a name for myself to kind of like, I don't want to say debut because I didn't consider it as my coming out really in terms of making a name for myself. It was more of like staying afloat. So I took on an executive job, opening somebody else's place again, right before the pandemic hit.
Well, at least it wasn't your thing that
right
had to take a hit during pandemic, unfortunately for that person. But
yeah.
So pandemic, you turned to farming, and you're still doing that.
Yes.
And it's been 3 years. This is your third growing season or just your second growing
This
season?
is my third year.
Okay, good. Third growing season. And your produce is beautiful.
Thank you.
Why don't you talk about what you grow? So
we have this song in the Philippines called Bahay Kubo, which means basically like it's the hut, the village hut. The song goes naming all the vegetables from A to Z.
Whoa.
It's a song about the alphabet that is tied into produce. So it sings about every little bits of like vegetable that Filipinos kind of like. So if anyone is listening to this and you're a Filipino who knows that song, you know for a fact that that's what I grow.
Do you want to sing the song?
Oh gosh.
You don't have to. You don't have to. I can find it online and put a link to it.
Yeah, maybe just.
But that is,
I'm not as proud with my singing voice as my farming.
You've got so many bad skills. Do not feel bad about that. I think that's remarkable that there is a song in a culture that is all about food and also probably teaching the ABCs. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Yeah. So to answer your question, it's literally that. But it's also hard to
so you decided to make the song into your farm,
right? Because it goes through the entire list of all the quintessential produce in our cuisine,
but only one per letter.
One per letter, yes. That's right.
And so now I have to ask the question, is your farm in alphabetical order?
It's not.
It could be.
It could be, yeah.
Legit question.
It's hard because like another strategy that I have to implement really is to navigate how to grow in our zone.
Yes.
So I capitalize on growing annuals rather than perennials. Majority of my crops are annual crops. I do have some perennials, but these are like herbs and such that aren't really much a part of our cuisine. Even though we do use like oregano, we use parsley, like cilantro. That's very common, but it's not like part of my strategy. Yeah, so I grow those things that are funny enough, but I also don't want to make it sound like it's stereotypical. That's one more thing that I kind of try to kind of walk carefully on. It's already hard to tell someone what Filipino food is and what type of cuisine it is. It's even harder to talk about the ingredients, which on another level, it's also very global. The one thing that I realized being a farmer is that we eat the exact same things. We call it somewhat different, but it's the exact same zucchini. It's the exact same beets, like it's just a different hemisphere. It's just a different recipe, but it's the same ingredient no matter what.
And the zucchini might look a little different. The beet might be a different color.
Right.
But
in essence, it's the exact same ingredient.
So what kind of unique things do you grow? You want to talk a little bit about those and some of your favorite, and maybe talk about people's reaction to it at the farmer's market?
Oh, yes. The one thing that I always talk about, the three main crops. So first of all, these are called spinaches, even though they're not related to spinach. In our terminologies, it's just a broad term that really just defines leafy vegetables because of its use. These three would be Malabar spinach, water spinach, and Egyptian spinach. So the names would be alukbati for Malabar, kangkong for water spinach, and saluyot for Egyptian spinach. These three are prominent because of just their contribution to our culinary history. One, they're easy to grow. Two, they're super nutritious, and three, they were introduced through colonization. Maybe not all of them, one of them. But it's significant because people grow them in their backyards. It's an easy source of food, and it's nutritious. So those are the three things that I always bring at the market that I try to kind of like introduce to people who might want to try something different. And then just the initial reaction from other things that I also grow that people remember from growing, and not just Filipinos, predominantly Asian cultures for sure, backgrounds, but like sometimes Lebanese people would come up and say like, oh, I recognize this, and I'm like, they have this in Lebanon. I can't believe that. It's really astounding when I discover things like that. When I'm in my head, I'm like, oh, only Asian people eat this, and then somebody comes along and they're like, oh yeah, we grow that very commonly there. I'm like, really? So yeah, so those are 3 examples of what I grew. And then the more unique ones would be like a loofah or a bottle gourd. I tried
Loofah to eat?
loofah to eat. So essentially, a lot of times we harvest fruits immature, loofah being one of them, and it's before it becomes all spongy and stuff. And it's a staple. People eat that regularly. It's very common for us to find that in our markets, and just like everyday food.
What has been some of the reactions, not just Filipino people, but all kinds of different cultures, but like some, I guess maybe Americans looking at some of your produce, and is that curve really high, really steep?
I definitely stick out like a sore thumb, just to kind of give you an example of what it's like when you see me at the market. Because I really do bring different unique ingredients, and it is great because people are drawn to it. It's a conversation starter, but I think the crowd is split, meaning some people are just particularly just curious and just want to know, but some people really are adventurous. They want to try something different. They're that type of people who are maybe vegetable forward, who just are just like looking for a break from the monotony of their diet. But it's pretty clear night and day, the type of people, the inquisitive ones, but they don't buy. And the interested ones that are really there, they're just like, they know the value in eating diverse foods. They know the health benefits of just having like varied ingredients in your diet. So it becomes more pronounced when the more that I interact with those type of people. Like I see, but it is 50-50.
Straight down the middle.
Straight down the middle, yeah. I think it's pretty clear that it's still 50-50.
Okay. So what is next for you?
What's next? So I think it's pretty obvious. The end goal.
Shit. Sorry. Obvious? I didn't get the obvious bit.
I think, well, not quite. I have been I'm trying to kind of keep it under the low just because I don't want to jinx myself. But I have been trying to open up my own brick and mortar. Like
on the north side?
On the north side. An actual Filipino restaurant. I think that would be the crowning jewel.
I did hear about this. I mean, I don't know how I wasn't sure if it was true, but okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I think because one thing for sure is because I feel like in my life, particularly in my work life and just in general, when something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And it figuratively applying that to the restaurant, I've always felt like, I'm almost there. I'm going to be able to do it. And then it doesn't happen. And I just don't want to disappoint myself, my expectations. I've been working hard to really open up my own restaurant. I've come close, but I've never really been able to. So this time around, I've been putting in a lot of work and energy into just like cultivating that and really just, no pun intended.
Absolutely, your brain is just a pun machine at this point.
I really want to open up a Filipino place that one doesn't necessarily have to be a farm to table, but I do want it to carry over my farm work because I see the value in that. I really want to I want to make that connection between our food systems and our food ways and access to urban areas and just the urban demographic in general. So I realize that that's quite it's quite an endeavor to be able to do that. So I know that at the end of the day, my goal is to have a Filipino restaurant, but it doesn't rest on having a farm, an urban farm. It can still be a restaurant without it, and that's where I'm at right now. Is really just trying to develop that business concept of opening up a restaurant, and hopefully with the restaurant, like I said, I could find ways to continue my work with farming. Realistically, I cannot farm and cook at the same time. I have to pick one of the two options for me. As much as rewarding farming seems like, the way I made it sound like, it really is rewarding, but financially it's a very steep hill to climb. And I realized that going back to just being an adult, right? We have to find ways to be sustainable in our long-term goals. I want to retire right. I want to be able to have a good life. I want to have a stable life, and that made me realize my goals. So that being said, I want this restaurant to be that. I want it to be if I am able to open this restaurant, I want it to be my final work. I want to invest myself into it. Otherwise, I would just have to face reality and look for something more stable. Like, regretfully, that's the truth in this. I've already realized that in the beginning. I just don't want to live life in regret, not knowing what it would have been if I was able to open a restaurant.
You got to go for it.
Yeah. So I have been putting in a lot of my energy into just like getting to that end goal. But I also recognize that there are certain hurdles that I cannot get over, and there are certain setbacks that are just there, and the best way for me to move forward is to just acknowledge them and be able to really just capitalize on what's in front of me and what I can grow on.
Speaking of growing, though, a lot of I'm assuming you'll want to use some of the foods that you've now, brought into people's lives.
Yes.
and introduce people to, but how will you source those?
So I have been thinking about that deeply. Luckily, with my experience and my involvement in the market, I was able to create connections in the tier of farmers that I didn't have as a chef. So it's a different level. Chefs know each other through the grapevine, even though they've never met, but that's like the deep connection between chefs. Same goes with farmers. Farmers know each other, they have their own grapevine, they're deeply connected with each other through farming. And now that I had a dip into that, I kind of have like a light bulb turned on. I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe I don't have to farm this. Essentially, my strategy is to find farmers that I can give them this ingredient for them to grow, that can become part of their product mix, and that I know that I can help them market. And really, just because I've seen the interest in the consumers, these ingredients are the ones that I sell the most. So I know that if I can hand it to some other farmer who might want to take on that one, they don't have to take my farming. They just have to take that ingredient, make it part of their operation, and it becomes, I know I'm giving them something significant because it's marketable. People already recognize that ingredient. Essentially, I primed the market for them. So that is essentially what I've been trying to develop in terms of like circumventing the fact that I cannot farm and cook at the same time.
So you're looking for 26 farms that you could give one set of seeds
one alphabet,
to.
one alphabet,
yeah.
one ingredient. And
Is this accurate? Is what
not
you're doing?
quite, but I think it's really just finding the people who do see the interest in what I have to bring or what I have to give. That's another set of skill that I try to really develop, is like just knowing, just to be able to gauge the interest in other people, and particularly if I'm trying, like you're asking someone how to, you're teaching someone how to fish, right? So it's a big ask, and I wanna, well, maybe not fishing, farming. In that analogy, I'm asking somebody else to take on something that I've worked hard on and developed. But I know with confidence I can be like, hey man, you not only can you grow this, not only am I gonna buy this from you, you can also put this in your market stand. You can also put it in your system, your operation. It becomes integral to your operation. So I know there is a strong proposal in that connection that I want to establish with those farmers.
Yeah.
It's very convoluted because my strategy really, the more that I'm doing, I think it matters that you do it yourself first, and then you realize what you're capable of, and then it's really just like acknowledging what you are capable of at the same time, and knowing like, all right, I can't do this, but somebody else can, and I should be able to hand that to them, and being able to do that without any like regret, or just like, I'm confident and comfortable asking someone, can you grow this for me? So that really is something to be said in terms of like someone's just like character in general.
Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm very
Thank
excited
you.
for you.
Thank you.
So a big part of this podcast and the purpose for this podcast is to sort of look at, you know, where people come from and how they got to where they are now, and how they like built on those skills or experiences. And I think you've laid it out pretty well. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think was really pivotal in your development to where you are now? And the wind.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
The chills are coming.
At least we got sun.
And we're outside.
But that wind is pretty...
Yeah.
I don't know if it's affecting the sound audio on this at all, but I mean, it's down there, but... I don't know. We'll see. If it's affecting the sound, I apologize to my listeners, but it's totally worth it. You'll push through.
Well,
we'll push through.
It's authentic, you know. Like, we can actually say for sure that we are in the outside, the outdoors.
I've been putting little like sound warnings, like, oh, there's a plane, there's some kids screaming in the background on this one. You're gonna hear a truck going, but like because I'm doing these all. This is my podcast evolution.
Yes.
So I am trying out new ways to do things. So
something that I didn't mention,
right,
in how I got to where I'm at. Let's see. That is a very hard question to answer, because I think there's not one specific answer to that. I think it's a compounded answer. You know, it takes a lot to uproot your life and then establish in a completely different environment and a different world. That's a lot for someone to, particularly like growing up. Maybe when you're a kid and you don't remember, sure, but I grew up having friends and families that I left behind. That's something that it takes a big part of you away, leaving that behind, that you could never replace. Even though I thought I was going to be able to just find that new piece of that in my life and be able to just like live, I had to learn to be someone I'm not. I think that's another thing that to answer your question, how I got, like, once I was here in this country, I started noticing that I was growing up or growing in a different way that I didn't think was accustomed, or it wasn't as parallel to how I imagined my culture to be if I was growing up back home. Needless to say, I can't imagine myself growing up now in the Philippines if I were to go back. Based off of how I've become myself now here in the U.S.
Is this where the name of your farm came from?
Essentially, yeah.
We haven't even talked about that. But when you were saying that, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I was like, that is it, right?
That is it, yeah.
So can you say the name of your farm? Sorry, I didn't even mention it in this episode. It'll be on.
No, it's fine. Amboy is actually, it's somewhat of a slang. It's a portmanteau, right? It's American boy. So it's pretty, that's pretty obvious. And I think Amboy can be used quite literally in that sense. But in the Philippines, we call someone Amboy when we think that they've become westernized. Essentially, the description that I laid out on how I came to this country is the perfect description of what Amboy means in my country. So someone from the Philippines, if I were to visit home, people would start calling me, "Hey Amboy, hoy Amboy," like that's what they would say, Amboy. They don't say it quite as phonetically right as we do. Our diction is very hard. We sound like we're arguing all the time. But essentially, that's what it means. It's like someone who either grew up in the Philippines, who immigrated, or might have lived some part of their life in the Western world, and they become westernized, particularly in the U.S. Sometimes, maybe you went to Europe or somewhere, we still call you Amboy just because of the association of like that Western culture. It doesn't necessarily have to be the U.S., but it was particularly developed just to kind of like indicate like, oh, you're a person of like, you're from the Americas, you're from the U.S. But it's also it's both positive and negative. It can be a way to be like, oh, you're so high on your horse, I don't even know who you are. That kind of Amboy. Or you could be like, wow, you've made it well now that you kind of like you went from poor to rich because you're now in the US. You're such an Amboy. So there's a different way of using that word, but in essence, that's what it really means. It's someone from my country who was westernized, and they keep living that part of them from the Philippines that they've now incorporated, or they're incorporating their Western experience into their Filipino life.
So you're here and you're incorporating your Filipino heritage into
my American life.
Your American life.
Yes.
That's great. And I for one, am grateful.
Thank you. But that is, I think that's what I came to understand about what even American cuisine in general. People probably don't know what is American cuisine. Well, American cuisine is global cuisine. It's the experiences that people bring from different backgrounds that makes it one cohesive thing. That's what my experiences are, from living in different cities, living a gypsy life, trying to like explore and experience, and that's what Amboy is now becoming. It's become my lived experience and my character in general.
Relocating and uprooting was something that you talked about, and I think that kind of, you kind of made it sound like a negative, like you aren't who you were, or you feel like you're not being yourself. But I feel like the moving around, because I moved around a lot when I was a kid, and that creates a resilience in you to be able to make friends and be a little more adventurous. Do you think that was true for you?
Yes and no. I think eventually an immigrant will have to realize that they have to assimilate. At one point,
so it's deeper.
It's deeper because I'm proud of my culture. I don't know how to prove that. Not because I'm growing Filipino food or I'm cooking Filipino food. It goes deeper than that. But as an immigrant, I think when you say the phrase "when in Rome," right? Do how the Romans do. That's what assimilation feels to me. That's what it means to me. I have to do what Americans do. Even my English got better just by copying Americans. I hear the word and I'm like, oh, so that's how you say it. And it's not necessarily forgetting who you are, but in a way you kind of have to in order to assimilate. Like eating rice every day, for example. I don't eat rice every day anymore. I've forgotten of that part of me. Like, it's not.
I have other Filipino friends and they eat rice every day.
Yeah, but I'm comfortable with it. Because
don't give up the rice, Raf.
I still eat rice for the most part, but I also eat a well-rounded diet. I don't just use rice as my only source for starch. I have other sources of food for that, because eating diverse really is the core idea of eating a healthy diet. I don't want it to be one-sided. But again, going to the assimilation idea of immigrants in different countries, it's not that I wanted to forget that. I had to. It was necessary to be able to feel included. You kind of have to swallow your pride a little bit. It's a very hard pill to swallow. I'll be honest. But at the same time, I realized that sometimes you pick your battles. Do you want to stand out, or do you want to be part of the norm? And that is a struggle for anyone who has to uproot their lives, who's lived their lives, knowing what that is, and then living a different life once they've reached their new destination. I think that's just natural in terms of how I assimilate, and my experiences are unique to me. I don't want to say that every immigrant goes through the same experience, but I think in essence we realize in ourselves that we have to face these facts eventually, and it's how we approach it that really matters in that sense, not necessarily what happened to me. It's very deep.
It is deep, yeah. No, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Nothing really. I just want to say, like, take a leap of faith. For those of you who are just super inquisitive, I mean this as a farmer and a vendor. No, I'm just kidding. I do mean when I want to encourage someone to take a leap of faith. Don't do anything risky, but try something different. You know, like, go out of your normal ways to just, like, switch it up a little bit. Like, even with your diet, even with your food, even with your choices, you know, like, you're not only helping
something new.
Yeah, you're not only helping a small farmer business like me, but you're also helping yourself in the long run, because you're doing something good to your health and your diet that might not necessarily be, you know, like, immediate, but it affects you overall in some way that, you know, like, you'll feel more proud about it when you realize, like, when you're starting to realize and notice it, you know. And that's really what I want to encourage people. Just take a leap of faith.
Try a new food.
Try a new task. Yep.
Grow a new crop.
Be disappointed that you didn't like the flavor, but also be happy when you like the flavor. Like, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
You just take a risk.
Cool. That's great words of wisdom. Thank you so much, Raf. It was so good. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking me. I feel very important.
You are important. Pittsburgh is so lucky to have you, and I'm so glad to know you. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon. Everyone knows that food is cool. No secret. Eat that food with a bowl and spoon.
With Bowl and Spoon is written, produced, and hosted by me, Shelly Danko Day. Copy editing by Carolyn Ristow, details review. Original theme song was written and performed by Paul Labrise and Friends. You can listen to With Bowl and Spoon anywhere you get your podcasts. Follow us and send us questions or messages on Facebook and Instagram, or on our website, withbowlandspoon.com. Thanks for listening.